Welcome to the Lifestyles Unlimited Real Estate Investor Radio Show, a real estate investment program. Listen and learn how to use real estate to build wealth and passive income streams for you and your family. We bring you experts every day to discuss and answer your questions on everything from single-family homes all the way up to 600-plus unit apartment complexes. And now, the Lifestyles Unlimited Real Estate Investor Radio Show.
Welcome to the show. My name is Al Gordon, and as always, we're working on your financial freedom. On today's show, we're going to talk about something that impacts all of us. I mean, it impacts you. It impacts me. It impacts the person that cuts your hair. It impacts the person selling you groceries at the grocery store. It impacts all of your neighbors. It impacts the majority of the country. I would venture to say it impacts 99.9% of the country. What is it? Well, it's household expenses. It's the cost of living, the cost that you and I deal with on a monthly basis. We can't change it. Unless, of course, we want to just completely get off the grid and, but even then, there's expenses associated with getting off the grid. So I don't think we're going to resolve this problem anytime soon. But I think it's important to talk about expenses because, like I said, you've got them, I've got them, we've all got them. And if we don't manage them correctly, if we don't control them correctly, they can overtake our income streams. I did a little research and I looked at 3 different sources to determine what the average household expenses are in the United States. Now, this is average, meaning the expenses of some people are going to be higher. The expenses of other people are going to be lower. This is just an average. It's not a median. It's not half above, half below. This is just an average. This basically takes a look at everybody in America, throws them into a bucket, stirs that bucket up, and out comes the average. So let's get into the numbers here. According to Bank of America, the average household budget is $5,213. Yeah. Well, I should say the average household expenses. That doesn't necessarily mean that's what you're budgeting for. According to Lending Tree, they're a little higher. They think that the average household expenses are $5,315. So you know what I did? I said, okay, these are commercial institutions. They usually do a pretty darn good job of getting the numbers right. I mean, they've got a deep bench of people that number crunch for them. So I really can't argue against them, but I had to test the information. So what I did was I went to the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, and you know what I found? I found that the average based on their criteria was $5,102. At the end of the day, between the high and the low here, we're within a $200 spread, literally. So I'm just going to go ahead and say it's probably costing you, on average, about $5,000 to sustain your household. Now, some of you are saying, whoa, dude, that's a lot less than what I actually pay. Well, that's because you've chosen to have additional expenses in your household, or maybe you pay more for other things than other people do. And it's just the way it is. So your number might be higher. Some of you are saying, oh, whoa, I've got my expenses under control. I am nowhere near that $5,000 number. And that's a good news story. What we really need to do is we need to take a look at this average expense. And we need to dissect it a little bit, because what we need to do is have a better understanding of what we're spending our money on. And I think it's important in the real estate investing context that you understand what your numbers are. Because when you get involved with real estate investing, what you will find is that you will start replacing ordinary income with passive income. Now, when that passive income comes in, you're not going to work literally to get that money like you do for your W-2 job. That money comes in based on a minimal effort on your part. And that's why we call it passive income, because it passively streams in to your bank account. We talk about this all the time on this radio show, so I'll bring it up again. When you have enough passive income coming in that it meets or exceeds your ordinary expenses, your average household expenses, you have, in essence, retired yourself. Now, I've also mentioned on the show that the average monthly expenses from Lifestyles Unlimited's perspective is about $4,000. Why the big difference? Why is it that all these lending institutions, all these big banks, even the Bureau of Labor Statistics saying it's north of $5,000 and Lifestyles Unlimited says it's closer to $4,000? Because when we do the analysis, we look at it from the standpoint of this. There are certain expenses that you pay when you go to work at your W-2 job. That's just the way it is. Whereas those expenses get washed out when you become a qualified, well, I won't say qualified because that's got a tax perspective to it. What I'm trying to say is this. When you don't have to go to work, a lot of those expenses associated with you going to work disappear. There's also taxes that you pay based on your W-2 job that you don't necessarily pay when you're invested in long-term hold real estate. And that's kind of where the difference comes in. So what I'm going to do on today's show is I'm going to go through some of the average household budget expenditures by category. And we're going to talk a little bit about these numbers and try and put them into context of, should you be looking more at the $4,000 number? Should you be looking more at the $5,000 number? And I'll tell you, you should be looking at the $5,000 number right now if you don't have enough passive income coming in to offset your average household expenses. Once you get there, then you can start looking at the revised number, the lower number. Now, again, I realize there are those of you out there that are in six-figure jobs, you're high net worth individuals. As a result of that, you probably spend a lot more money on your average household expenses, and that's okay. But what you should do is you should sit down and put your pencil to the paper and figure out if indeed those expenses are legitimate or if those are some expenses that you could live without. So we'll get into the numbers when we come back on the Lifestyles Unlimited Real Estate Investor Radio Show.
Welcome back to the Lifestyles Unlimited Real Estate Investor Radio Show. Now, let's get back to your map to financial freedom.
Welcome back to the show. On today's show, we're talking about average household expenses. You've got them, I've got them, everybody's got them. Even people living off the grid have some form of expense. It may be minor, but at the end of the day, they still had to pay for their shelter. They still have to pay for some of the things that they need in order to sustain themselves because they can't necessarily get everything organically off of the property that they live on. Well, in some cases, maybe so, but I would say in the vast majority, they still have expenses too. What I'm looking at is some data that came from the Consumer Expenditure Survey conducted by the United States Bureau of Labor Statistics. Yeah, I'll tell you what, when you start digging into this stuff, you start wanting to go to sleep because it's definitely written, by people that use big words that none of us understand so that they can sound smart about it or something. It'd be nice if they would take some of that data and bring it down to earth so that you and I can understand it. Well, it's a good thing you've got me because what I'm going to tackle just that. We're going to take a look at some of the expenditures. We're going to take a look at maybe a little bit of income, and we're going to compare and contrast. But I think the most interesting statistic that I pulled out of all of this research that I've done is this statistic. The majority of you spend every single dime that you have on expenses. You live month to month. You live check to check. Your expenses are in line with your income, and that really doesn't leave you any additional money. So how do you go out and get more money? Well, you can either add value or you could provide a service for something. But when you're spending every dime that you make, it's a little bit difficult to do. What I'm getting at is this. You've got to take a look at your expenses, and you've got to find a way to chisel them down a little bit, because what that's going to do is that's going to allow you to start putting some money aside. And some of you do that already. Some of you set money aside, and you do it in the form of a 401k or an IRA or a simple or a SEP or a 403b, or some of you just use a good old-fashioned savings account because you're smart enough not to put your money into those things. Some of you, you've got no choice. Your employer mandates that you put that money away. It's part of your quote-unquote retirement plan. However you're doing it, whatever you're doing, as long as you're massing money aside, that's a good start, because you can use that money to start investing in real estate. And yeah, we've got vendors that can help you crack into your 401k and your IRA and help you get the money out without paying penalties. You're still going to pay the taxes, but at the end of the day, here's the way it works with those things. You pay the taxes whether you take it out when you're 70 or you take it out now when you're, say, 35. Taxes are going to be due. But I'll tell you, when you get into real estate investing, the tax structures are much more beneficial to you. And I'm not going to get into the tax nauseum stuff, because this isn't really a show on taxes. This is really more of a show on average household expenses. So, most U.S. households have the same category of expenses, which is basically put a roof over our heads, put food in our bellies, clothes on our bodies, and maybe a way to get to and from work or school. But depending on your circumstances or your stage in life, you might also be spending some money on childcare, on college tuition, or even on healthcare. All of these things can come into play in your lifetime. But the average income in the United States by household, based on that consumer expenditure survey that I looked at by the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, was $63,784. And you know what they did? They broke down household expenses based on the fact that you have a total of $63,784 coming in. What they're suggesting is that you are living paycheck to paycheck. Now, let's kind of break down some of these expenses. Remember, these are averages. Your experience may be different. You may be paying higher or lower in all of these categories. Remember, we're taking all of Americans, we're dropping them all in a bucket, we're stirring it all up, and we're pulling the averages out. So, housing, 16% of your budget. Transportation, 14%. Taxes, 12%. Keep an eye on that tax thing there, because I think that's something important to consider. Because some of the taxes that you pay when you're going to work, you will not have to pay when you become a passive investor in real estate and you're bringing in your money primarily in that way. Utilities and other household operational costs, 11%. Food, 10%. Social Security contributions, personal insurance, and pensions, 9%. Now, there's another area that you may be able to save some money in. I'm just saying, think about that for a minute. Debt payments or savings, 8%. And hopefully it's savings and not debt payments. Some of you are paying debts. You got to get those debts paid down. Yeah, I agree with Dave Ramsey there, but not all debts are bad debts. If you've got consumer loans, depending on what type of loans they are, maybe they're automotive loans, or, loan on your principal residence, I don't consider those bad debt. Now, Dave Ramsey does, I don't. Now, but here's where Dave Ramsey and I absolutely agree. Credit card debt, if you're carrying a balance on your credit cards, that is the equivalent of Satan in my mind's eye. You need to get rid of those. But if you're not making a lot of debt payments and you're actually setting money aside, that's a good thing. And the Bureau of Labor Statistics says that's about 8%. Healthcare, you're spending about 6% of your income. Entertainment, 4%. Cash contributions, 3%. Apparel and services, 3%. Education, 2%. And you can combine vices, personal care, and miscellaneous at 3%. Yeah, I said vices. We've all got them. We all do it. Some of you don't. I get that, but we've got a budget for it because it's an average estimate. Now, let's break these these categories down, let's talk about them a little bit. The average United States household spends $17,148 on all things related to housing. That's an average of $10,080 for direct payments on rent or mortgage interest, property taxes, and insurance, as well as any lodging costs for out-of-town trips. The remaining $7,000 covers your utility costs and other household operational expenses and even equipment. And about 64% of the United States households own their own home. And more than half of homeowners have a mortgage. Some of you don't. Those of you that don't, you know what you have? You have debt equity. Did you know that you could tap into that equity? You could pull that money out, and a lot of you are thinking, that's scary, Al, that's scary. I've got everything all paid off. Yeah, that's true. But, mortgage rates are extremely low today. I was looking at some mortgage offers that were made available to me, and one of the mortgage offers was as low as 2.79%. Now, granted, you have to be a disabled veteran to get that, but it was 3.29% if you weren't. I mean, those are great numbers. So you need to take a look at, what can you do with that money? Can you pull it out and redeploy it elsewhere? I'm telling you, that's something you ought to put in the back of your mind. And we'll be back right after this.
Warning, listening to the Lifestyles Unlimited Real Estate Investor Radio Show will change your life. We will teach you how to create wealth and passive income so you can be financially free. And now, back to your host.
Welcome back to the show. We are talking about average household expenses because at the end of the day, we've all got them. We all make out checks to a variety of different entities. We all go and use our ATM. What are those things called? Debit cards or credit cards when we purchase stuff. I don't know that anybody really uses cash anymore, although I did notice yesterday when my wife and I were driving around the hill country of Texas that when we sat down for lunch, there was a young lady that was actually paying her bill, with currency. And I thought, wow, that is such a rare thing nowadays. But that gets me way off track. Let's get back on track. What we're talking about is some of these expenses and some of these things that, you can mitigate or you can't mitigate. And I got on the topic of homeowners. Of the 64% of U.S. households that own a home, more than half of homeowners have a mortgage. That means less than half of you don't have a mortgage. And what I was making was a point of this. If you're sitting on a property that has a $0 payment. Now, you still have property taxes you have to pay. Those don't go away just because you paid off your home or you paid cash for it. You still have insurance that you have to pay for. That doesn't go away just because you have a quote-unquote free and clear home when it comes to a mortgage. But consider this. Let's say, for giggles and grins, your house is worth, I don't know, let's pick a number, $300,000. Your primary residence is worth $300,000. Now, I know there's a lot of you out there that are saying, Al, you're smoking crack because my house is worth so much more than that. Yeah, I know. Some of you live on the West Coast. Some of you guys live on the East Coast. Some of you guys live in, municipalities where those housing costs are really high. I get that. But some of you don't. Some of you live in areas where $300,000 is like more money than you'd be willing to spend on the property. So again, I'm kind of going for the averages here, so bear with me. So you've got a $300,000 property and you own it free and clear. So you're thinking to yourself, well, the reason I've got it free and clear is I don't want the burden of that mortgage expense. Okay, I get that. But check this out. Let's just say you did a 50% loan on that $300,000 house. So you're only willing to leverage about half of the value of the home. Now that's a very conservative play. So you're looking at about $150,000 in loan proceeds by refinancing the property and pulling that cash out. Now, let's say you've got a really good interest rate. I was quoted 3.29%. Now, I've got pretty good credit score and things like that. My credit history looks great. And some of you have even better credit scores. Some of you have more difficult credit scores, and we'll talk about that a little bit too. Assuming a 30-year mortgage, and you're thinking, 30 years, that's a long time. Don't sweat it. It's just an amortization schedule. You're looking at monthly payments of about $656. Okay, so you're thinking, okay, it's going to cost me $656. We're talking about expenses, household expenses, and you're wanting me to increase my expenses. And I'm saying, yes, in this case, I do want you to increase your expenses, because what you're going to do with that $150,000 is that's going to be your deployable capital to get into real estate. Now, I will tell you, with $150,000, it is doable to get into up to 10 single-family homes or a small 40-unit apartment complex. Those deals exist out there. They are able to be acquired. I was looking at my email today from some of the leads that were sent to me. I don't mean lead investors. I mean some of the opportunities that were sent to me by my real estate contacts. And I'm looking at stuff, $17,000 cash out of pocket, $14,000 cash out of pocket. Here's one, $17,000 cash out of pocket with a 96% return on unrealized capital gains. I mean, that's a great deal. And we could get into the minutia of that deal. But all I'm trying to point out is this. With $150,000, you can get into about 10 different properties. Now, you don't jump into all 10 at once, because that would be crazy. You shouldn't do that. You should take one at a time, get them acquired, get them renovated if necessary, get them stabilized, get the proper tenant in the property, because we screen out the bad ones, what we call purple Martians. We screen those people out. Those are the people that would get into your property, abuse you in the process, and then just go about their merry way and probably walk away without paying any rent. We call that a skip. But if those 10 houses are paying you an average of $400 a month in cash flow, that's after the mortgage payment, that's after the taxes, that's after the insurance. We don't really factor in any maintenance costs, because we do all of that on the front end. We look at what the property needs going into the deal, and based on that, we fix it all. And if the numbers don't work, if, let's say, our budget to fix a property is $30,000 and it's going to take $40,000 to fix it, you know what? We pass on that deal. We just go on to the next deal. What I'm getting at is this. If you've got $4,000 coming in, and now you've got a new expense of $656 a month, you're still netting about $3,400. Okay, let's call it $3,350. You're still netting about $3,350 a month in passive income. That's money you're not going to work for on a daily basis. That's money that comes in where you don't have to deal with the man or the woman. And I'll tell you what, I talked about toxic bosses last week, and if you didn't hear that show, go to lifestylesunlimited.com, hit the radio tab, and you're going to see all of our podcasts lined up there. You're going to see the Del Walmsley radio show. You're going to see this show with our multiple hosts. And just look for the one on toxic bosses. I think you'll enjoy it, especially if you've got one. Belaboring the point, let's get back into some of these expenses. Homeowners pay an average of $9,552 a year, nearly $800 a month on mortgage interest, property taxes, and other expenses such as maintenance, repairs, and homeowners insurance. The average mortgage payment also includes an additional amount each month that goes towards principal, effectively turning cash earnings into home equity. And that's what it does for those of you that, are living in your principal residence. Let's compare rent in the United States to that. The average rental payment is $784 a month, and the 35% of Americans who pay rent just a little less than homeowners each year for their rent, maintenance costs, and renter's insurance, which averages out to a grand total of $9,477. Now, again, this figure encompasses a wide range of rents from smaller towns to major metropolitan centers like Los Angeles, New York. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about your average household expenses. And I've still got a couple more I need to pick on when we come back after this break.
Welcome back to the Lifestyles Unlimited Real Estate Investor Radio Show. It's time to turn up the volume and fine-tune your passive income plan so you can create the lifestyle you've always wanted.
Yeah, I just love that catchphrase, helping you to achieve the lifestyle you've always wanted. I tell you, for years, there was a lifestyle that I always wanted, but it always seemed to be out of my grasp. And then along came Lifestyles Unlimited that basically created a paradigm shift in my life. I learned how to use passive income to offset my ordinary income. I now sustain myself off of passive income. I don't need a W-2 job in order to keep things going. I have enough passive income coming in to offset all of my normal expenses. And what we're talking about today is, some of these average expenses that are out there for your household. And what I suggested to you earlier is that the average U.S. household spends about $5,100 a month in expenses. And there are some ways that we can save you some money on your expenses by using passive income to offset those expenses. Now, here's one that caught my eye. For the average household, transportation costs are almost as much as what's spent on rent or the direct costs of home ownership, an average of $9,000 annually. $9,000 annually. Now, you think about it. I remember when I was going to work back and forth, I worked for the city of San Antonio for a while once I got out of the military because I was stuck on stupid and I didn't have a good financial retirement plan going. And I'll tell you, it was 45 minutes each way in the car, 5 days a week. Some days it was, longer days, but at the end of the day, I was spending a lot of money on gas and maintenance of the vehicle and wear and tear on the vehicle and things like that. Now, some of you may say, well, I don't have a vehicle. I just use public transportation. Well, ironically, the survey addresses that too. It says most folks, on average, spend about $225 on public transportation. Annualize that, it's about $2,700. Here's another thing that caught my eye. The average household pays almost $7,500 in personal taxes, not including property taxes or sales taxes. Now, we're going to pay property taxes and sales taxes regardless of where we get our income from. But it's important to know that with real estate, the tax advantages are much more favorable. You are taxed based on a capital gains rate, and that only triggers when you transact a property for sale. It doesn't trigger if you do a refinance because all you're doing is restructuring debt on the property. It doesn't matter how much money you're pulling out cash, how much cash is coming out tax-free. The IRS doesn't care about that, which is one of the ways we tend to continue to fuel our investments. We buy a property, we fix it up, we have an unrealized capital gains, we wait a little bit of time, let that note season for a while, we let appreciation occur, and then maybe we go back in and we refinance that property and we pull more cash out of it so that we can deploy that capital elsewhere. I mentioned taxes. Now, here's another tax that I think is pretty interesting. The typical U.S. household spends about $5,500 per year to protect its members from poverty and old age or due to disability or death. What are we talking about here? Your average Social Security contributions, plus some personal insurance, and if you're investing in a pension, because nowadays they just don't give you a pension. You actually, if you have one, you actually kind of have to pay into it. It's the way they've structured this stuff is crazy. But if you think about it like this, you're paying Social Security and Medicare taxes, and your employer pays half of it, you pay half of it. If you become self-employed, you get to pay both sides of it. It works out to be about 15.3%. Now, what if I told you that if you become a real estate investor, you're not paying Social Security and Medicare taxes? What I'm getting at is this. By transitioning out of a W-2 job where the man basically has you in a chokehold, no pun intended, and investing in real estate and having that money come in passively, you're able to offset a lot of those expenses that you're paying right now. The cost of going to work, you've got to buy, clothes, you've got to look presentable, you either have to pack your lunch. Most people eat out. So because it's just simpler, it's easier, but there's a cost associated with doing that. You've got all the transportation expenses associated with getting to and from work, let alone What if you have to travel in interday? Does your employer cover that? I don't know. Maybe you're footing the bill for that. But if you can eliminate those expenses, if you can reduce your expenses for clothing because you're not having to buy suits all the time, you're able to run around in jeans and a t-shirt like I do, you save a lot more money. But if you're also able to eliminate those Social Security and Medicare payments, and you're able to reduce your actual taxes that you're paying because you're weaning down on that W-2 income, that is the difference between that $5,100 that we talked about as an average for household expenses versus the $4,000 that we use in our models when we talk about the average household expenses for a Lifestyles Unlimited member. It's day and night. It absolutely is day and night. And I'll tell you what, when you come to one of our free workshops, and right now you can't physically come to our offices. I think they're going to open up the offices next month. But right now we're doing everything virtually. And virtually is kind of cool because, you don't have to get in your car and drive there. You don't have to sit through the seminar and then drive home. You can actually view the seminar online in the comfort of your home. So you can go home, you can crack open an adult beverage or whatever you do, and, sit down and let us spend an hour and a half educating you on what the possibilities are. Now, we have a website that you need to check out to see about registering for one of these live workshops, these free workshops. And the URL is this, freeworkshoplivestream.com. That's freeworkshoplivestream.com. When you get there, just enter your data and we will get you connected to the live stream workshop that makes sense for you based on the timing. In other words, we offer them like on a Saturday at 12 noon Central Time. So if you're on the West Coast, that kicks off at 10 a.m. Or if you're on the East Coast, it kicks off at 1 o'clock. We try and make it easy for you. We have other live stream workshops that kick off like at 6:30 p.m. Central Time. So that's, about 7:30 p.m. on the East Coast, about 4:30 p.m. on the West Coast. That might not work for you because maybe you're at work or you're stuck in Bay Area traffic. Yeah, you guys in the Bay Area, you know what I'm talking about. We also offer one that kicks off at 8:30 p.m. Central Time. So for you West Coast people, that's 6:30 p.m. Now, if we get out to Hawaii, I don't know. I don't know if we're doing one that like kicks off at 11 p.m. so that you guys can have one at a reasonable time in the evening. At the end of the day, we have a growing group of investors that are Lifestyles members in Hawaii. I mean, I got off a conference call last Friday and I was amazed to hear the number of Hawaiians that are coming to us because what they're realizing is what they're doing is ineffective and it's not working. We're talking about these average household expenses, and one of the ways you can start putting money aside is to sit down and look at those expenses and make a determination as to whether or not, some of those expenses are reasonable and prudent. Some of the expenses that you have are just, you're just spending money. Maybe you're going to a steakhouse and dropping a couple $100 on dinner, or maybe you're going out to, maybe you're going out to a movie or something like that. I know none of us are going out to a movie right now. Well, I think that movies have opened up in some areas. They haven't opened up where I'm at. So we're still doing the Netflix or the Amazon Prime to get our movies. But I'll tell you what, I do enjoy going to a theater. Now, I don't go there very frequently, but when I do go there, it's an opportunity for me to spend time with my family. Now, because I'm not spending money on going to work, I'm not spending money on Social Security and Medicare, I'm not spending money on ordinary taxes, I'm basically conserving my money, and I'm able to make my money go farther while controlling my household expenses. Is it starting to make sense? I hope it's making sense to you. And I know it's a lot to wrap your head around. I get that. It's kind of like when I went to the Bureau of Labor Statistics website and I started trying to wrap my head around all that gobbledygook that they publish. But at the end of the day, here's where it boils down. As a real estate investor, you have significant benefits versus being a W-2 employee. You really do. I don't care whether you're a high net worth individual or a low net worth individual or somebody right in between. You have got to start taking a look at an exit strategy involving real estate so that we can get you out of what you're doing and get you into what you should be doing, which is learning to retire yourself in 5 years or less. And remember, it's not the money, it's the lifestyle. You have a wonderful day.
The Lifestyles Unlimited Real Estate Investor Radio Show is for entertainment purposes only. Please consult a professional regarding your personal investment needs. Nothing presented on the Lifestyles Unlimited Real Estate Investor Radio Show constitutes an endorsement, recommendation, offer, or solicitation to buy or sell any product or security.